Everybody, 10 o'clock a.m., Friday, September the 4th. We are heading into a 4-day Labor Day weekend here in the United States. And so some of you are going to be out of town and enjoying yourselves in that way. God bless you. Be careful, safe travels, prayers, and all that. Those of you who are sticking around at home, praise the Lord. We need everybody to keep things moving forward, don't we? And so 10 o'clock Sunday morning, 5 o'clock Sunday evening, you know the drill. Hope you'll be in your place. But for now, we're here in Genesis 47. We will be done with the book of Genesis after Monday's devotion. It's been a good time. And just to catch you up real quickly, Joseph has now brought his entire family to the land of Egypt to be cared for during the balance of the famine and even to live out the rest of their days. We're going to see that Jacob is very near to the end of days. Of course, Jacob dies before we get to the end of Genesis. Hope that wasn't too much of a spoiler for you. But we're going to look at where things are here today in chapter 47. This is going to be indicative of the duration of the famine here, what we'll learn. And so, chapter 47, book of Genesis, if you haven't turned there yet, go ahead and do so, and we will pray and begin. Father, thank you for this book and what we've learned from it. We're such a blessed people to have the truth of your word given to us. Thank you for these who deem it important enough to read and learn and study every day. I pray you'd encourage our hearts with what we read today. Teach us and help us, please. Amen. Chapter 47, verse number 1. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh, and said, My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds, and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. So notice Joseph's humility here. Joseph pretty much runs everything in Egypt, and he can do whatever he wants to do. Pharaoh trusts him implicitly. He doesn't require anything of Joseph, yet Joseph remains by choice to be accountable to Pharaoh. And he shows up and he says, Pharaoh, I just want you to know, as we've talked about in the past, my family has moved to Egypt now, and I've put them all in Goshen, and that's where they're dwelling. And so Joseph is continuing to be submissive to the people that God has put in charge of his life. Verse 2, And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, probably the oldest 5, and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, What is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, Thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. They said moreover unto Pharaoh, For to sojourn in the land are we come, for thy servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. And so they come and they're asked what their profession is, and they say that they are shepherds. Now remember yesterday, I don't know if you can still see the end of chapter 46 there. Let's see here. It says, verse 32, It shall come to pass when Pharaoh shall call you, ye shall say, What is your occupation? Ye shall say, Thy servants tradeth men about cattle from our youth until now. So, and it's because the Egyptians despised shepherds. And it's interesting here that they don't do according to Joseph's instructions. They go ahead and say shepherds. But it's also interesting, nothing comes of this. We're not told anything different about it. Verse number 5, And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle. So this is interesting. Pharaoh is giving Joseph free rein to put his family in the best of the land and to make sure that they're going to be well taken care of. You know, I think of this very often. How many blessings are in my life because of God's blessing on someone else who loves me? You think about the fact that there are people who are recipients of blessing because of God's blessing on others. What I'm saying is, Joseph's brothers and Jacob would not receive this kind of treatment if it weren't for the price that Joseph paid. I preached on this a couple weeks ago in church. We ought to be grateful for the things that we enjoy that others have paid a price for. I drove on roads already today that somebody else paid to have built, and somebody else built. I'll tell you this, I've not built 1 foot of road. I haven't cleared the path. I haven't laid the gravel. I haven't poured the concrete or the asphalt. Yet I drive on countless and untold miles of road that I didn't have to build. It's when the children of Israel were told by God in Deuteronomy 6, you got to be careful because you're going to live in houses you didn't build, and you're going to eat from vineyards that you didn't plant. You're going to eat from crops that you didn't plant, and you're going to enjoy cities that you didn't have to build. Be careful that your heart doesn't become ungrateful. These are blessings of God that He's put into our lives based on the sacrifice of other people. And we ought to appreciate all that we have. I think sometimes of how folks they'll walk into a church and they'll feel led of God to join that church and that pastor there and the people. There are a lot of folks that paid a dear price for that church to exist before you ever decided to walk in that door. Don't now come in and be critical of the church when you didn't have any part in building it. Be grateful for those who sacrifice so that you could have a good church to attend rather than criticize it and tear it down. Same thing goes for a company. Someone will be hired as an employee, and then they'll look around and they'll say, man, I don't really like this place. This could be improved, and that isn't right. You know what? Consider that somebody's worked very, very hard to get that company where it is. Don't just walk in and be ungrateful and say, hey, this could be improved. But anyway, I preached on that a couple weeks ago. I don't need to re-preach it today. Just be grateful for all the blessings you receive that other people paid the price for, rather than critical of it. And here we see Jacob and Joseph's brothers going to enjoy the land of Goshen, not because they deserve it, but because God blessed Joseph. Verse number 7. Oh, and he also said, hey, Joseph, if your brothers, are really good at ruling things, then you can put them to work overseeing my business as well. So he's given Joseph the ability to hire his brothers to work for Pharaoh. And so there's just yet another benefit. But notice he says, if they're worthy, if they're good enough. Don't just give them jobs out of nepotism. And here's the thing. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Sometimes people say, oh, the hiring of any relative is nepotism. That's ridiculous. It's not true. If someone is incapable and yet they're given a position, that's nepotism. But if they're capable and knowledgeable and hardworking and will do a good job, that's not nepotism at all. That's giving someone who earns a position that very position. Verse 7, and Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. That's interesting, isn't it? Presumably this means Jacob prayed for Pharaoh or gave him a blessing from God. Verse 8, and Pharaoh said unto Jacob, these verses crack me up every time I read them, and there's a big lesson in here for us too. Pharaoh said unto Jacob, how old art thou? So this should be answered with a number, right? How old are you? I'm 48. And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Now that's where he should have stopped. But look what he says. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. That's just whining right there. See, Jacob, he always bugs me, and I told you yesterday there's one more thing I was going to pick on him about, and this is that thing. Pharaoh says, how old are you? And he says, I'm 130 years old, but let me tell you, few and evil have been the days of the years of my pilgrimage. In other words, it's not been a very good life. You know what, Jacob? Knock it off. You married the woman of your dreams, Rachel. You were given two amazing sons from her, Joseph and Benjamin. You were given a good wife in Leah who gave you 6 sons. And you have a total of 12 sons, plus Dinah as a daughter, and presumably other daughters as well. And not only that, you have been reunited with your son that you thought was dead. You're now moved into the most fertile land in all of the land of Egypt. You're going to live your days out in glory and splendor. God is going to use you and your 12 sons to found the nation of Israel, after which it will be named after you. And your answer to Pharaoh is, few and evil have been the days of my pilgrimage. Knock it off. Now, I'll tell you this. His attitude stems directly from his focus. Jacob has spent his life focusing on how he's been mistreated. I was mistreated by Laban when he gave me Leah first. Then I had to work for him for another 7 years. And then when I left in the middle of the night, he pursued me. Then he accused us of stealing idols. And my brother Esau, I thought, was going to kill me. And all Jacob's ever focused on in his life is the negative. That's why when he gets to the end of his life, he has this negative response. Few and evil. How about the fact that God wrestled with you all night, Jacob? How about the fact that God's given you a new name and he's going to make a nation after your name? And that's the way it is for you and I, isn't it? If all you focus on in your life is the negative, then you're going to be down, depressed, discouraged, and you're going to think your life is terrible. If you want to focus on the positive, then you're going to be excited and you're going to be ambitious and you're going to be grateful for the good things in your life. You know, right now our country's going through a difficult time, and it's seen difficult times in the past. And I'll tell you, there's a whole segment of our nation's population. All they want to talk about is how terrible this country is. It's funny, I was listening to an interview with the actor and governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he, of course, set out to be the greatest bodybuilder in the world. He achieved that. He set out to be one of the most popular actors in Hollywood. He achieved that. Then he set out to be successful in government, and he achieved that. And so every major goal that he's went after, he's achieved. And someone was asking him about, as he travels around the world, what does he see and how does he feel about the United States and what's going on? And he said this, no one ever asks me, Governor, how can I get to the Middle East? No one says, Governor, how can I get into Russia? Governor, how can I get to Australia? He said, no one ever asks me that. You know what they ask me everywhere I go? How can I get to America? And he says, we are still one of the, if not the, freest nations on all the earth. You look at what's being done, the rioting and the protesting in the streets. I read just yesterday about 3 people in Iran who, I don't know if they spoke out publicly or they wrote something online criticizing the government in Iran. And one of them is going to be, he's going to receive 74 lashes and then be put to death. And then his 2 brothers are going to serve, I think, a combined 84 years in prison just for speaking out against the government. Man, here you can burn the flag of our nation and nothing happens to you. And so what I'm getting at is this. It depends on what you look at. Does our country have problems? Absolutely it does, because it's full of people and run by people. Wherever people are involved, there's going to be some problems. But if all you do is focus on the problems, yeah, you're going to be sour. But if you'll focus on the positives, the good attributes and aspects of our nation, then you're going to be grateful. And that's not to say you ignore the problems. You work on the problems, you try to solve the problems, but you don't decide that everything is terrible solely because of the problems. You look at the whole picture and you're grateful for the positive. And you can apply that every way you want. Apply it to your relationship with your church, with your employer, with your marriage, with your children, with your neighborhood, with your country. It doesn't matter. You decide, you know what? I'm not just going to focus on the negatives here. I'm not going to ignore them. They have to be dealt with, but I'm going to look at the good things and the positives, and that's where my primary focus is going to be. So that's my advice to Jacob here thousands of years later. Verse 10. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. Doesn't tell us anything else about the conversation. Pharaoh probably said, okay, good to hear. Thanks for coming to see me. I'm glad you're in Egypt. And Jacob blesses him one more time, and then he leaves. I'd get a complainer out of my area as soon as I could as well. Verse 11. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families. So Joseph settles his family in, and then he sees to it that they're taken care of. By the way, we got to take care of our people, don't we? Take care of your family, take care of your church family. The Bible says the household of faith. Take care of the people in your life. God's given you people to see to it their needs are met and they're taken care of. Somebody's got to do that. Step up, shoulder that responsibility. Verse 13. We're going to shift gears here and we're going to look at a little government now. How Joseph handles this famine and how he leads the people of Egypt through it. Verse 13. And there was no bread in all the land of Egypt, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. So this is the lowest point of the famine here that we've seen so far. People are running out of money. They're running out of food. They're on the verge of starving to death. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Remember, Joseph has been selling corn to the people. And so everybody's bringing all the money to Joseph and he's selling them the corn. Verse 15, and when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. So they're coming and saying, look, no one cares about money anymore. Money as a, see, here's the thing. I don't have my wallet here, but if you take a banknote, first off, that banknote has no value whatsoever. It is a piece of paper. Its only value is what it represents. And so you got a $1 banknote or bill, it's worth $1. You get a $5 banknote, it's worth $5. But they're made out of the same thing. They're not worth anything. They're only worth what they represent. Well, here you get to a point that money has failed because there's nothing to back that money anymore. There's no value behind it anymore. And so you bring, you go to somebody who's got some vegetables or some produce and you say, hey, can I buy some of your produce? The guy's like, no, because that money's not worth anything. There's nothing behind it. Now we're trading. Now we're bartering, aren't we? Goods and services back and forth. And so the people come to Joseph and say, the money's failing. What are we going to do? We need your help. Now look what's happened here through this process. If you remember, Joseph said they were going to store away 20% of all the crops throughout the 7 years of plenty. So as everybody planted and raised crops, 20% of it was given to Pharaoh and to Joseph, and they stored it all away. It was the taxation there on the crops. And so the government pulled all that in, and they were sitting on it. The people with 80% burned through their 80%. They didn't save. And that's a problem that people have. We tend to live, you know, by consuming all of our means, if not beyond our means. And that's what it means to go into debt, to go into credit. So then when troubling times come and things are scarce and short, now we don't have anything. We don't have any money. We don't have the ability to get ourselves through the drought, the famine. Well, here Joseph was wise enough to put 20% of it away to help get them through it. And now they've burned through everything that they have, and they're telling him the money fails. Verse 16. And Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail. Said, okay, so the money's no good. Give me your cattle. What do? And they brought their cattle unto Joseph. And Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses and for the flocks and for the cattle of the herds and for the asses. And he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. And Joseph is very wise here, because if he didn't take their cattle, the cattle are going to die. There's nothing for the cattle to eat either. But Joseph has enough reserves and stores to be able to take care of this livestock. Verse 18, when that year was ended, they came unto him the second year and said unto him, we will not hide it from my lord, how that our money is spent. My lord also hath our herds of cattle, and there is not aught left in the sight of my lord, but our bodies and our lands. Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of the borders of Egypt, even to the other end thereof. So after that first year, after he takes all the cattle from them, they come back and say, we're out of everything. We don't have any money. We don't have any crops. We don't have any animals. All that's left is our land and us. Buy our land and buy us. And Joseph says, okay. And so he buys up all the land of Egypt. Now this is completely under the control of Pharaoh, everything. And he brings the people in, and he brings them in from the rural areas and puts them in the cities just for ease of caring for them. He can feed them. He can take care of them better. It's going to be less strain on the system by having everyone all together. Joseph is brilliant. And this is why God put him in charge of all of this. Verse 22, here's an exception. Only the land of the priests bought he not. For the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them. Wherefore they sold not their land. So the priests were given a certain portion of land. Consider it the church, let's say. And that's where we've got that separation of church and state. And it's something we try to practice here in our country. The state stays out of the business of the church. Here we've got California. We asked you to pray for the North Valley Baptist Church. The state is trying to shut down the church. And here we see that the state doesn't interfere with God's men. Verse 23, then Joseph said unto the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. So he says, okay, now this is all our land, and you came and we're feeding you, we're taking care of you, but you're going to work for us. And by the way, if a man doesn't work, neither should he eat. That's what the Bible teaches. And so he's not just going to take care of them while they sit around and watch Netflix all day. He's going to have them go out and sow in the fields. Verse 24, and it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the 5th part unto Pharaoh, and the 4 part shall be your own, for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your households, and for food for your little ones. So he's getting these people back up on their feet again. Okay, you've come to us so that we can help you and get you on your feet. What we're going to do now, the land that you've given to us and the seed you've given us, take the seed, go sow it. Now, give us 20% of it back. and keep the 80%. With the 80, feed yourselves, take care of your families, and keep enough seed back to re-sow these fields. We don't want to do this again. So he's teaching them to be self-sustaining again, but he's requiring 20% tax for using the land. He's brilliant, isn't he? Verse, let's see, 25, and they said, "Thou hast saved our lives." It's like when General Motors received the bailout from the federal government a few years ago. "Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. So there you go. Pharaoh didn't take the land of the priests, nor did he tax the land of the priests. I get tired of hearing people say that churches ought to be charged taxes and property taxes. Here's the thing. Churches are composed of the people that live in the communities around the churches. Those people already are taxed to death. Their properties are taxed, their incomes are taxed, their purchases are taxed. These people have already been taxed. Don't then make their tithes and offerings be taxed yet again. Leave the churches alone, leave the properties of the churches alone, and they've already been hit numbers of times. Verse number, where are we? 27. Okay, little shift of gears here. I know we're at 26 minutes. We're wrapping this up. Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, talking about Jacob, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly, which was God's promise. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel, Jacob, must die. And he called his son Joseph, and said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. So he's going to give Joseph the blessing. That makes Joseph the patriarch, not Reuben. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. And he says, I don't want to be buried in Egypt. Bury me with my fathers in Canaan. Verse 430. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt, and bury me in their burying place. And he said, Joseph said, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, Swear unto me. And he sware unto him. And Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. And we'll pick it up there tomorrow. And we're going to see Manasseh and Ephraim come into the picture. Soon we'll see Jacob deal with all 12 of his sons. Jacob's eventually going to pass. And that'll be the end of the book of Genesis. 28 minutes here. Thanks for hanging. I see 10 of you are still with us. God bless you. Thank you. That was a long one. I'm not recapping anything. You can go back and watch it again if you want. Happy Friday. Happy Labor Day weekend to you. I hope you have a great weekend. If you're here local, come see us on Sunday. If you're out of town, we stream the services. You know by that. Get on the Facebook page and watch them. God bless you. Like, love, share the posts. Have a good Friday.